Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Crapper. This week with the percussive potter Sean Hall
Good evening.
and myself, Tim Appleton, as per usual. Now tonight we're doing a top six picks. We're going to be ranking the first Genesis solo albums. And we calculate that there are six of them. So we've got Peter Gabriel, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, Steve Hackett, Phil Collins, and we're including Anthony Phillips, for good measure. We haven't included John Mayhew, Mick Barnard. He's your favourite,
Mick
isn't he, Sean?
Barnard. Oh yeah. I mean, he's really he's responsible for all of Genesis's success over the years.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're gonna go worst to best basically, and we'll see where we get to. Um, did you manage to catch Sean the any of the Black Sabbath gig yesterday?
Well, I've seen snippets.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
I mean, let's be honest. First of all, n nobody died,
Yeah.
so that was a success. I think Bill Ward
Mm-mm.
pulled it off fairly well. I think
Yeah.
he did quite well. I don't know if he was at the last Sabbath reunion or not, so it's nice to see him up there. Good old Bill Ward.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was struck by
Mm.
Ozzy Osbourne's sort of
Mm.
satanic throne,
Mm.
which looked to me a bit like an old people's commode. And I thought, well, at least, he's improving. He's getting better because the last time he needed a dump, he did it in a lift, which is for you Americans, that's an elevator. So, he did it in full view of a hotel lobby. So, I mean, he's used to it by now.
Yeah. Jokes are always funnier when you have to translate them. That's a famous comedy norm. Yeah, I mean, I've only seen clips of it as well. I
Mm,
have to say, I thought that they sounded. They only did four tracks, didn't they?
they did.
Um, Mostly, three of them were from Paranoid, which is our favourite album because we've already analysed it. If anyone wants to go back and check that out, please feel free.
Please
Um,
do.
yeah, because no one checked it out at the time. But yeah, but they didn't do Rat Salad.
No.
Um, but yeah, I thought that. But there was some terrible Sabbath covers by the warm up bands. Honestly, I saw Metallica doing a couple of like very sort of deep cuts, deep Sabbath cuts, and they
Mm,
sounded really bad. I love Metallica, but
mm.
uh, they sounded like they'd sort of like rehearsed it, about half hour before. It was getting sort of Live Aid vibes.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, good. Well, without further ado, let's go into our pick of the six, or whatever you say. Um, now, number six, as I said, is worst to best. Sean, do you want to start us off? What have you got at
Well,
number
I
six?
can. I fear that Tim might actually be able to guess my order anyway. But no, number six, and he's got a lot of fans, and I don't mean to, put him down. I think
Yeah,
he's a
here,
brilliant
here
drummer.
we here we go.
I think he's a brilliant drummer, and it's Phil Collins' Face Value at number six. I think the best thing I can say about this album is there's some great sort of pared down drumming. He's doing a sort of soul, sort of Motown thing. There's some great sort of fills in there. He's developed that gated reverb sound with he developed with Peter Gabriel. It's a well produced album. It's got Hugh Padgham on it. He's got the Phoenix Horns on it. He's got Eric Clapton on it. Couple of tracks I like. Obviously, In the Air Tonight is the main one. I Missed Again is really good. Um, there's a few sort of breakup, separation songs on there. You know, it's supposed to be influenced by John Martin. Um, what else can I say? It's a bit of a strange mix of genres. I think, having listened, I did listen to it once, and for me, it's a strange mix of genres. You got a bit of funk on there, a bit of R&B,
It's quite eclectic album, isn't it?
eclectic, very eclectic. Bit of jazz, bit of Indian raga. Um, you know, the cover. You know, it's a very intimate album. Hence the sort of the close up uh, cover, the photo.
Mm,
But it just it's just not for me. You know, I think the playing on it is extremely good.
mm,
But
mm,
I prefer Phil in his role with Genesis, really.
mm,
So it's not an album I'll go and stick on. You know, I mean, if
mm.
I turn up at a party and somebody's playing it, I'll tolerate it. But
You won't
I'm not,
leave in anger.
I'm just not the biggest fan of it. Why?
Mm,
I don't know.
yeah,
I can't put my finger on it, but
yeah.
I'm not really a fan of Phil and his solo work.
All
Sorry.
right, good. Well, that's appropriate because my number six is Face Value by Phil Collins. Right. Yeah, I really strongly dislike this this album.
Mm.
We might be, in aggregate terms, we might be, as you were alluding to earlier, we might be in a minority here.
Mm. Mm.
It's got out of 5 stars on All Music, if you can believe that. They think it's like
Mm.
like a masterwork.
Mm.
But I don't think that at all. It's, I tell you what I do like. I like the bit where the drums come in at the end of In the Air Tonight. Do you remember that bit?
No, I don't
That's
think I know that bit.
no, well, that's funny. Yeah,
I've
yeah.
got.
It's most people miss it. But yeah, apart from that, I can sort of take or leave practically the
Mm.
whole album. I don't. I find it terribly boring, and I don't. This isn't just like a prog prejudice either. I'm
Mm.
not
Mm.
being sort of like snooty. I think
Mm.
that because I do like good pop music, I just don't think that this is that.
Mm.
I think, as you were sort of mentioning, I think he's a great musician, isn't he, Phil Collins?
Mm. Mm.
Great musician, brilliant musician, really, brilliant, intuitive, intelligent musician, and a great singer, really great singer. But I think with one or two sort of notable exceptions, I don't think he's a great songwriter. I have to say, I think he writes sort of singerly songs, but I
Mm.
don't think that they work. You can they're sort of like they're quite dynamic, vocally dynamic. But I just don't think that they're great songs. And but yeah, I think he's good at like collaborating with people, isn't he? I always think of him as like a bit of he's a good union member. Like he sort of supports his comrades in the
Mm.
musicians' union. I suppose that's because you had to be in the musicians' union, didn't you, in Britain at
Mm.
that time? Um, but yeah, I suppose he'd be like one of those right wing trade union members. So he's very
You don't.
supportive of his comrades, but doesn't like paying taxes. Um, yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I think that the version of Behind the Lines I don't appreciate. I think the
No.
Genesis version is better.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
good.
Tomorrow Never Knows is pretty redundant.
Yeah.
I think it was his tribute to John Lennon because he just died, and he.
Oh, of course.
Takes me back to the thing about being a good union member. One track I do like is Hand in Hand, the instrumental. Da, 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 da. I
Oh,
think
yeah,
that's
that
the,
is
the
good.
tune.
That
That's
is
good.
good.
That one. It reminds me a little bit of. We were saying it was very eclectic. It reminds me a little bit of Patrick Moraz. Curiously
Mm.
enough,
Mm.
like the story of I and things like that. It's got some of that sort of kind of world music vibe, but not like in a good way.
That could
um,
be his jazz fusion thing, couldn't it? With
that's right.
Brand X. Yeah.
Actually, to be fair, I think there's not enough of that on this album. I think that's part of
Mm.
the problem. Each kind of his default setting is like this kind of rather bland pop music, and this really set the tone for his whole career, didn't it? I mean, this perhaps is his
Yeah.
best album. I don't know. I mean, I find it sort of, I'm not really hugely into his solo stuff,
Mm.
but people, you're right, people do love him, don't they? I
I do.
mean,
I do.
he's he's very popular with women. I find,
Mm. Women and rappers.
yeah, but not Bob Villain. Um, Yeah, I mean, because I've known, been out with girls that love Phil Collins. I mean, they just
Mm.
love him. Even love
I
him as a
do.
person. Even
Mm.
my wife is a huge
Mm.
fan. So and he's completely transcended. As you said, Brand X, Genesis, all of that stuff.
Mm.
In the sort of the kind of cultural imaginary.
Mm.
We were in a shop the other day and they were playing In Too Deep
Mm.
by Genesis, and my wife said, "Oh, this is a really great Phil Collins song, this one,"
Yeah.
and I did
Yeah.
my mansplaining thing because that's how our marriage works, and I said, "Actually, this is by Genesis," and her response was sort of somewhere between like indifference and just perplexity. It's like who
That,
you know
that's
who
so that's so Alan Partridge, Tim.
Well, it's like it's sort of like who's Genesis? That's the
Yeah.
sort of standard response.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe it's because it's sort of a romanticism here. I find it quite sentimental, and actually, this album is almost depressing. I think it's beyond sentimental; it's
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
depressing.
Yeah. It
He
comes
is
across.
he's talking about his wife, but
Yeah.
it's so depressing that it almost ends up being
Mm.
like a treatise on like the pointlessness of existence, doesn't it? But normally I would like that kind of thing, but it
He
rings
he
a little
took
hollow.
he took lessons in being depressed from John Martin.
Oh, is that
Apparently,
right? Right,
he's very keen on John Martin. I always find him a little bit depressing for some reason.
right. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah.
I can see the connection. Yeah.
Mm.
All right, good. So let's unless we have anything else bad to say about Face Value, let's move on to number five. Now, absolute consensus so far.
Mm.
Where are we with number five, Sean?
Well, I'm going to rock the boat, and I do apologise. He's a great lad. He's a brilliant singer, and he's got two fantastic songs on this album. But I just don't like this album as a whole, and it's Peter Gabriel, the
Ah.
Car album. So I do apologise because I do like Peter Gabriel. I think he's great. He's a great lad.
Mm.
Uh, but I just think it's a bit patchy. I don't know what it is. I think it's got like, I don't know if we're doing album covers. It's got one of the best album covers, I think. Well, probably the best.
Mm.
It's got the Ford Cortina. Peter Gabriel's like staring out of the front window of the car. It's a Hypnosis cover. Um, Two brilliant songs on it for my money, which of course is Salisbury Hill, and I really like Here Comes the Flood. Um, they could be two of the best songs of his entire career, two of the best Genesis solo songs ever written. Um, but I just think there's sort of some peaks and troughs on this album.
Mm.
I don't know. I think Moribund the Burgermeister, I think, is almost that's a weird opener, I think, for my money. So
I think it's Genesis-y, that one.
it is. It could be left over from the lamb, actually.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
just think it's a really weird thing to open with.
Mm.
I'm not too sure about Excuse Me, which is sort of barber shop. I find that really odd. I don't particularly like Modern Love, which reminds me of, you know, could be Bruce Springsteen. I'm just listing things I don't like. Um,
We are going to get more positive as we go on.
he's doing a blues on there, isn't it? Waiting for the big one. I don't like Down the Dolce Vita.
Hmm.
I feel awful
You
to
just
say it,
you're just
but
reading the whole track list and explaining that you don't like each song
when
individually.
I should like it. I love the cover. I think there's a couple of brilliant songs on there, maybe more, but if I put the album on, I think I'm left sort of feeling disappointed,
Right.
and I think it's because
Mm.
I know he didn't really get into his stride maybe till about the third album. So I don't know. For me, it's a slight disappointment, despite he's got two of the best solo Genesis songs there. So
Can we do?
sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
And can we do a parenthesis? Do you like Peter Gabriel too?
Hit and miss again, I think.
Right.
Hit and
Okay.
miss.
Right.
Yeah.
I just wonder where you are on his
Yeah.
trajectory. But anyway,
I think by three, he'd sort of
yeah,
get more interested.
yeah, that's right. Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. All right. Good. Well, unless you want to list any more songs on the album that you disliked, I'll do my five. Now you and me have already diverged quite a
Mhm.
lot with your last choice. My five is a curious feeling by Tony
Mhm.
Banks, which I think is surprisingly weak. Right.
Mm.
I don't think I'm saying anything here that really probably hasn't been said before, much better by other people.
Mm.
But yeah, I think this is a conundrum here with this album because I think he's basically, for me, he's Genesis's best writer, and then he comes up with almost the worst solo debut. So I think perhaps what it is he's a sort of. I tend to think he's like a Paul McCartney type figure. He works well in teams, basically. He works well in a team that he can sort of hammer into submission, very much like Paul McCartney. And when he goes out on his own, then he is perhaps a bit, lost. And I don't know. I don't really like any of the songs on this album at all. So, I've listened to it quite a few times, and each time I put it on, I have a sense of sort of trepidation, and I think now there must be something in this album that I can get into, and I always end up by the end thinking, oh well, that was a real, waste of an hour because they're very long as well. This album,
Mm.
I mean, it's sort of he's based on a sort of short story, I think, but he's playing it. He's playing the whole thing out for all it's worth. I mean, the fact that it's based on a short story, I don't think is an accident because I think the words here are terribly prosaic.
Mm.
There's a bit in the title track, I think it is, where he goes, "The man, you could be the man from Uncle" or something. It's just like, what are you going on about? It's not barely even poetic. I think that the only bit I like is the introduction, from the Undertow, because it
Mm.
reminds me of a Genesis song that I like a hell of a
Yeah.
lot, which is for Undertow from,
Yeah.
and then there were
Mm.
three, and
Well,
it was going to be,
it
yeah,
was going to be on it, wasn't it?
that's right, yeah, it should have been.
Yeah.
So they took that bit, like the introduction,
Mm.
which builds up
Mm.
to this beautiful song. Let's just have the introduction on this album. The
Mm.
beautiful
Mm.
song goes on another album. Great.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think the singer is bland. You know,
Mm.
I feel bad saying that. But technically
Mm.
good singer,
Mm.
but just not very characterful voice, I think. But it's sort of almost appropriate here because I think this album is so sort of dreary and rambling and sort of uninspired, really. That I don't think the singer's really to blame. It's just a sort of mirroring effect, I suppose.
Mm.
So it pains me to say all of that because I love Tony Banks, but I think this just isn't. I think this is a missed opportunity, really.
What do you think is can't even talk tonight is his best solo album?
I'd have to say the best of Tony Banks. No, no. I think it's probably that one with Nick Kershaw on.
Oh God, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
He did a record with Fish, didn't he?
yeah, it's just he had sort of like guest singers, didn't he? There's one of is it Banks' Statement or
Mm.
yeah, that's right. I mean, I can barely.
Or his latest album should be called Bank Closure, which would be more appropriate, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. So yeah, that's that. This is really tricky because if you and me say to each other, "Do you know what do you think of the other?" It's like I haven't heard that one because there is something about these first albums, isn't there? Because you're thinking, like so this is a
Yeah.
new career, in a new
Mm.
town to paraphrase David Bowie, and you're thinking, maybe they're going to go off and do something like
Mm.
really interesting, but
Mm.
actually the results were quite mixed. Um,
Yeah.
you know, our follow-up video will be like the second solo album of each ex-member of Genesis. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. I'm rambling as Tony Banks did on A Curious Feeling. All right, good. Sean, number four, if you
Oh,
don't
number
mind.
four. Okay. Well, again, another contender for best album cover. Again, it's a Hypnosis, and it's Small Creeps Day.
Ah,
Um, and this is an okay album. I sort of, I wanted to like it more, is how I felt about it. I think there's some really good moments on here. It's
I
slightly,
I I wanted to like all of these albums more.
um, I don't mind it. If I'll put it on, I'll listen to it. It sort of anticipates Duke, in some of the sort of the styles. It's slightly pop rock. Um, Steve Hackett liked it. He made a point of phoning up Mike and saying, "Oh, it's a good album," and then he crushed away, dropped the phone. No, he didn't. He didn't. And again, it's a contender. It could be a Genesis album because it's got Ant Phillips on it playing keyboards. Simon Phillips is drumming on it, who I met once at a drum clinic, and he signed my stick bag. And he had a sort of a curly mullet, I remember,
Yeah.
and
I I always wondered. I always wondered what that sort of scrawly writing on your
yeah,
stick bag
yeah,
was.
looked like an oil smudge. That was Simon Phillips. Now there's a few choice reviews about this. Chris Welch liked it; he thought it was great. There were a couple of bad reviews. Enemy Paul Dunoyer at the time said, "This is probably the biggest heap of pretentious twaddle or piffle I've had to I've had to plough through in ages." So that was Paul Dunoyer. I don't suppose he was actually a prog fan. Um,
Mm,
this is slightly more damning. Steve McMullen of All Music gave it 2 out of 5. He said Rutherford is completely incapable of writing even one memorable song. So, despite these harsh reviews, the album sold well, and I think that's because they stuck a
mm,
Genesis sticker on the front and said from
mm,
Mike Rutherford from Genesis and made a
mm,
big point of promoting it.
mm,
Whereas Tony Banks, they just stuck it out there,
mm,
no info about it at all. But it has got I think it's quite a catchy cover,
mm,
and maybe that had something to do with it. But
mm,
Tone, because they're both at the same time, that those two albums, the Tone, I call him Tone Banks.
Time Bank.
Um, yeah, but I just jotted down. I quite like Moonshine. It's got a bit of a Duke like riff. Romani's quite catchy. The drumming on it is good. um, I thought Every Road was a slight touch of the Wind and Wutherings in a sort of
Mm,
ballad style.
mm,
But yeah, there are some good highlights on there, and I think he attempts the guitar parts fairly well, because he's
mm,
having to sort of step out of the shadow of Steve Hackett a bit, and
mm.
I think he does a fair job. But yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. I just wanted to like it a bit more.
Yeah. The common refrain. Um, that should be the lemma on the. That should be the motto on the thumbnail. I wanted to like it more. Um, right. Well, this is getting very interesting for me. Um, yeah, because they did their albums at the same time, didn't they? Two of them, Rutherford and Banks. I think they were on a hiatus, weren't they? Because Phil was trying to patch it up with his missus.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, which didn't go very well, and so they ended up doing Duke. I don't know. Um, all right, good. But this is very interesting. My number four is The Geese and the Ghost. Right. I think this is a nice album. It's probably again like really. I mean, like the most. It's the Anthony Phillips album that I enjoyed most of all the ones I've heard. Which, to be fair, is not all of them. I mean, there's so many. It's a bit like Steve Hackett. They're so
Yeah.
prolific. I think that's the word.
Mhm.
But you'd have to dedicate. You have to sort of go on holiday for a couple of weeks and dedicate the whole time to listening to their albums non-stop in order to analyze them all.
To Skegness. Go to Skegness for a holiday. and then
Yeah.
throw yourself into the sea.
There's nothing else to do in Skegness, is there? Um, I don't know what the American equivalent of Skegness would be.
Not really.
Um, so look, I think that Geese and Ghost is a nice album. It's a bit romantic for my taste. On occasions, it almost seems to veer into new age a bit. I mean, that's perhaps a bit unfair, but I always I always get an allergic reaction if I think something's going, an instrumental album is going new agey, you know. And I do wish that there was a few more lyrics as well. Because I think that the songs are really nice. I think. Um, what are they called? Which Way the Wind Blows, God If I Saw Her Now, and Collections of the other one. I think they're all really nice songs, and I enjoy them more than the instrumental stuff, really. And I think I think the thing is that the instrumental stuff is all sort of mood. And I think when people try to write songs, I think perhaps this is the strength of the Peter Gabriel album, actually, which I will come back to later. Um, when people write songs, it does at least, not everything has to be a song, but at least songs force people to think of interesting counterpoints. And otherwise you can get trapped in sort of mood writing, I think, you know. And I think the instrumental tracks are quite long here as well. And almost seem unstructured sometimes. I mean, I think it's funny. It says the Geese and the Ghost parts 1 and 2, as if we cared, you know, because it runs consecutively, you know. But I think Geese and the Ghost is better than Henry, you know, Portraits of Tudor England or whatever it is, seems totally unstructured to me. I mean, I think they should have put that on side 2, really. Because the Geese and the Ghost, the title track, I think is at least
Should have had the sound of, yeah. I mean, was it the Tudor portraits? I mean, there's no sound of heads being chopped off, is there? There's no sort of sound of axes grinding, you know, anything like that.
yeah. Percussive head chopping is notable by its absence on this album. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much all I have to say on that. I think sometimes it reminds me of early Genesis. You know,
Yeah.
I think Geese and the Ghost at one point practically sounds like Stagnation, but it sounds like early Genesis again before they put the vocals on. You know, it's sort of suggestive of inspiration without necessarily being particularly inspired. Do you remember? There's a story I remember Rick Wakeman telling about when he did the Six Wives of Henry VIII. And he gave it to A&M or something, and they said, "Right, it's great, but just bring it back when you've got the vocals done or whatever." you know, and he thought that was amusing, but I do get that vibe here sometimes. I think if I'd have been at the on the record label, I would have said, "Yeah, great, but bring it back when you got the vocals done." Anyway, yeah, so that's my there you go. That's my number 4, the Geese and the Ghost. So, number 3 then, if you will.
Yeah, number 3. I think the thing is, I think it was the 70s. I think, guitarists of that era, I mean, well, they're musicians, aren't they? It's almost a bit like I was likening and go and do some cloud studies.
Yeah.
All my internet might get cut out any moment. But it's not realized into a whole painting. I think that's my feeling about Anthony Phillips. They're like little pen studies,
Yeah.
that you might not necessarily want to look at or listen to. But that's how I tried to think of it. Anyway, okay, I'm digressing.
That's good. That's a good metaphor.
Number 3, I've actually got Tony Banks. I've got a curious feeling, and I've got a curious feeling that I've put Tony Banks at number 3. I actually quite liked it. It's obviously got a very Genesis-y sound. It didn't do very well when it came out, which Mike Rutherford did a lot better. I think it's got a terrible album cover. For one, I don't think that helps sales. It's Will Await Boatman of the Dead by an Australian painter called Ainsley Roberts. So I don't know. It just looks dreary to me. It's not,
Mm.
it's not a fantastic cover. If you saw that, you'd think, what's that about? Stick it back. Maybe the fact it's got Tony Banks on it. Want to stick it back as well. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So it's an adaptation of Daniel Keyes' Flowers for Algernon, if you've ever read that. I haven't. So anyway,
Um,
no, I think you're right. I think From the Undertow is great. He's doing guitars on it, so you've got that sort of Genesis-y,
mm,
Hackety sound. I think I quite liked it because he's got Chester Thompson on it, so
yep.
I like his drumming, and he's quite indistinguishable from Phil Collins, really.
Mm,
Um, there's parts on there that sound a bit like Trick of the Tail. I think it's the line, the middle eight. It's got a sort of piano piece that sounds a bit like Trick of the Tail.
mm,
Um, again, like Mike Rutherford, is anticipating with some of the keyboards. You got that sort of Duke sound. I quite liked the singer. I think he had a slightly more rock voice, whereas I think Mike Rutherford's singer was slightly more soul-y. So
right.
it's personal taste, isn't it? Basically. But I do think some of the lyrics on here are absolutely bloody awful, if
Mm.
I can be honest. Have I got time to read?
Yeah, go for it.
Where are we? Yeah, I mean, he's got on a curious thing. Yeah, he's got some early political comment, and we don't like to do politics on Crapper, do we? But
Mm,
I'm just going to parrot what the
mm,
great Tony Banks, has said. Um,
mm.
okay, here we go. If you listen to fanatics on the left or the right, you'd think they'd solve it all, but they don't convince me. Some statesmen, gurus, men of science and of philosophy all have an answer, but they won't agree. So if anybody tells you stories of how they're going to change the world, be they the Aga Khan, the ex-Shah of Iran, or the man from UNCLE, that's, as you said, the man from Uncle, say I don't believe you because we don't need you. So he's getting in a bit of politics there, to quote Ben Elton. Um, I think terrible. I think
Mm.
side one is better than side two. He's got the ballad. I think it's you, which is a Gil part in there. It says, "How strange! I never noticed your eyes are the colour of your hair." I mean, what an awful comparison to make, really, isn't it? I mean, might have pink hair. Um, So yeah, some of it's a bit. I mean, he's got the Waters of Leith on there, which is a bit tedious. It's again, he's getting stuck. Maybe he's thinking of the Fountain of Salmacis. I don't know, but it doesn't quite match the heights of the Fountain of Salmacis. Ends on a bit of a damp squib, but what there is of it, I quite liked, and I actually went back to listen to it more than once.
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know why that is. Yeah, it's strange. Now, my brother likes it as well. I found out. I think he said that's definitely his favourite Tony Banks album. I think so. It's a bit of an underrated album.
Mm.
It just got lost in the ether. I mean, bloody hell, it came out 79. What a time to release it.
Yeah. Are you still there, Sean?
I think we've got to freeze up.
The audience will enjoy me drinking a glass of water for
You,
30
you,
seconds or so. You're right. Yeah. Okay.
you
I,
have
I
to have
think
something stronger.
I think that your last point, if I understood you correctly, is that it was a bad time because punk had just happened, right?
Mm.
And I think Tony Banks actually said, like, this was a bad time for this album to come out because of punk and everything. But I sometimes think that's a bit easy, for them to blame punk. It's a bit of a like lame excuse, I think, because
Mm.
that was a factor, but in Britain, in the British
Mm.
context, but. A lot of sort of more conventional stuff was still selling, and also like they're not at the top of their game, at some of them at this point. And I think it's slightly unfair to blame the poor punks,
Yeah.
because they You know, everyone has a go at the punks. Um, all right, good. So that's right. So that was your three, wasn't it? Right. So
Yeah.
my three is Voyage of the Acolyte.
Hmm.
I quite like this album. It's just quaffable, isn't it?
Comparable.
I think it was you that said that he was the George Harrison of Genesis. I think
I
you
think
might.
it
Yeah.
was me who said. I think. Oh dear.
Are you still there?
I'm still here.
This
Yeah.
is this is one of those recordings that's turned into like a séance. Are you there? Okay. I'll just plow on. So yeah, I think this is like this is the all things must pass, isn't it? Of Genesis
Yeah.
solo albums. I think a lot of people think Voyage of the Acolyte is a great album. I think it's got some really nice moments. I really like the Sally Oldfield bits, the Phil Collins bits. Again, sort of great. The singing, Phil Collins singing parts are great. This takes me back to my point about like the songs actually force them to sort of write rather than just do moods. And there is some mood writing on this album, but I think there are some really nice, interesting instrumental passages. There's a bit I always really cherish in, is it Ace of Wands, the first track? At the end
Mm.
where he goes, the guitar goes da 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 da. I think it sounds like it's got the air of a sort of late '70s BBC TV theme tune, but it's in a good way. um, but yeah, I don't think it all works. I mean, I think some of the structural writing here is
Mm.
slightly inferior. He sometimes just sort of repeats things, you know, without sort of again without any sort of variation or development.
Mm.
So some of it feels a bit cut and pasted to me. Yeah, and so as again, like that's why I like the words because I think that they're a sort of automatic variation,
Mm.
as it were. But on the whole, I think this is a pretty good effort from our Steve, and it doesn't make the top of my list, but it's top three for me.
Right. Yeah.
Um, you've put it higher, haven't you? But I'm sure if I'm not miscalculating. So, but anyway, let's get on with it.
Right.
Let's go to two. Who have
Right.
you
So
got to?
I'm gonna have to speed through this
Mm,
one because I've got a
mm,
fair few
mm.
little anecdotes I've picked up about this album.
Right.
And it's number two is Private Parts and Philip Geese and the Ghost, isn't it?
Mm.
Private Parts. That's not even in it, is it? So released in 77. God. Uh, I think he began it in 74. He may even have had stuff lying around from 1970. It's a cover. It's like, as you say, it's very romantic, a very sort of fairy tale um, cover. And I was going to mention who painted the cover. It's by Peter Cross, who was an illustrator. And apparently he was quite well known for blending English romanticism with kind of Heath Robinson style gadgets. And Ant Phillips knew of this guy and he went to find him. Apparently, he had a studio at his parents' in a greenhouse. So he actually had to go and, knock on the door. Oh, he's out in the greenhouse. I mean, God, hope it wasn't the middle of summer. He'd been boiling. Um,
This is the kind of detail you don't get on other podcasts.
So it was intended to be an album with Mike Rutherford, but it kind of all sort of fell apart.
Mm.
Um, Halfway through, he went to the Guildhall because he'd heard Sibelius and decided he wasn't good enough. So he went to sort of brush up on his musicianship. So the album kind of got shelved, shall we say? Um, but moving on to recording, I know there's a couple of funnies. Uh, in August '75, he used Tom Newman's recording studio on his canal barge in Little Venice in London. So an aquatic recording studio.
Mm.
But unfortunately, he kept having problems. The tape recorders, I think they were Tayak, they kept recording static clicks on the tape, so they were pretty unusual usable. So anyway, they went to this recording canal barge, and the equipment malfunctioned after the boat was struck by another boat. So, he did. It was no wonder it bloody took how many years? God, it seemed to take forever. He used musicians from the Guildhall, and one of them, Martin Westlake, he was the kettle drum player, the tympanist. Would you call it a
Yeah, I think so.
timpanist?
Timpanist. Okay,
Brilliant.
so look, little roundup. So this is take
Hmm.
two. I was thinking this is a bit like the Geese and the Ghost parts one and two, isn't it? For us, it's significant, but for the audience, it won't make a difference.
Oh,
But yeah,
dear.
we had some technical trouble there. So Sean bowed out and has bowed back in again. Is that the phrase? By the way, Sean, before
Mhm.
we carry on,
Mm.
Merriam-Webster Dictionary has the definition of the word for somebody who plays the timpani as timpanist.
A timpanist.
Now, you were in
Right.
the middle of an anecdote about them trying to get the timpani on the boat. Is that
Yeah, he
right?
couldn't get it on the boat, wouldn't fit.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure whether they had to make the door larger or what they did. But it wasn't all just a product of circumstance. Anthony Phillips actually played a prank on Steve Hackett's brother John, who he'd hired to play a couple of flute parts,
Mm.
and he wrote he scored a piece for him that was basically impossible for him to play. It was too difficult and too fast. And John Hackett basically had a nervous breakdown about it, and apparently he said he was quaking inside for days. So that was nice of him, wasn't it? Um, so Stumpy liked it. If you remember Paul Stump, he
Ah,
said that yes, he said that there's flavorful sonorities of woodwind chiming against spiderweb guitars crossed on an elusive stylized folk texture with the churchy chord sequences that dominated Genesis' early music. So he really
yeah.
liked it.
That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing Stumpy says a lot.
He he does, doesn't he? Um, I forgot to point out earlier on Henry portraits from Tudor times. There's some cannons shot on there.
Mm.
Now I don't know if they did that on the barge. Bec- so yeah,
Do you
so
think they
it may
borrowed
have
them from ELP?
ELP. Yeah, I mean, but there are some really good songs on here. I mean, God, if I saw her now is really nice, and it's sort of a lullaby. Bit of
Mm.
a bastard though, the male character in it, isn't he? I always think.
Yeah.
Um,
What a sod.
yeah, what a song. Chinese Mushroom Cloud. It's got a bit of a King Crimson-y part to
Mm.
it. So there's lots of great ideas and musical textures on this album. It's very evocative, very dreamlike. But as you say, it's a bit all over the place. But I still enjoy listening to it, and that is my review of Anthony Phillips at last.
This is lovely because we've got two totally different lists, which doesn't always happen, does it?
No.
Um, okay, so look, my number two is Peter Gabriel. One, obviously,
Hmm.
his debut album is colloquially known as Peter Gabriel One,
Mm.
and I think this is a great album. I think, I mean, for me, to be fair, most Peter Gabriel albums are a treat. You know, I think he's such a strong writer. This isn't his best album, I don't think, but I still think it's really great. I obviously rate it much higher than you do, not just literally, but metaphorically. I mean, I think it's a really nice set. Um, I think what's great about Gabriel, I think, is he makes something interesting happen in every song, right? That's the way I feel about him, and it's not always like vocal stuff either. Like there's musical stuff in there as well that's unexpected and interesting. I don't know if people. I sometimes think people don't appreciate how difficult it is to do that, and I think he's a master of like the unexpected, basically. Which is basically what you expect from a great artist. The only weak point for me on this album, this is gonna. I mean, I like. It's very eclectic again, and I like all of the different styles he's adopting. I even like, Excuse Me and Waiting for the Big One and things like that. I think that there is a sort of Randy Newman influence, I think, there. But I think he's sort of trying out different styles at this point. Later on, he becomes a bit more homogenous, his stuff. But I mean, in a good way, you know. I think he finds his feet on Peter Gabriel 3 and starts sort of ploughing his own furrow. At this point, I think he's testing stuff out. But I still think he makes something interesting enough happen in each song, you know, regardless of all the different styles, to make it an interesting whole, you know, whole with the W. Um, the only weak point for me, and this is going to get me thrown out of the Masons, out of the Union, is "Here Comes the Flood." Actually, I love the verse, but I don't like the development in the chorus. I think it's boring, basically. So you know, I've never been a big fan of that track. But the rest of it, I think, is you know, that's just me, really. I think the rest of it was.
Overproduced, he said, didn't he? Overproduced.
Well, there's an interesting contrast, of course, between the first album and the second album, because the first album is overproduced, and a lot of people find the second album underproduced by Mr. Robert Fripp, right? I do think the production on the second album is not great, actually, you know, as much as I love Robert Fripp. But I do slightly prefer the second album musically. But I think I mean, I think all of these albums work. I just think he's doing different things on each album, you know, and this is his sort of almost more sort of experimental album, but not in a good way. I mean, he's just kind of like testing stuff to see if it works. But I think he's good enough at making each piece work, you know, on its own terms. That I think this works very well. Yeah, it's a Bob Ezrin production, isn't it? This one. All right. Well, look, let's go to our number ones then, as it were. um, what's left for you? I think I can remember the only one you
Well,
have mentioned.
the only one left is the wine glass crusher himself. It's Steve Hackett.
Mm.
Voyage of the Acolyte. I think I kind of picked this through sort of muscle memory. I didn't actually listen.
Right.
I listened
Right.
to the others a lot more when I came back to sort of do my research.
Mm.
And I just listened to it to sort of confirm why I liked it in the first place, really.
Mm.
So it came out 75 after the Lamb. Hopefully
Mm.
his hands had healed up. Um,
You're obsessed
um,
with this wine glass anecdote.
I don't know if this was after he'd been thrown out of that party with Robert Fripp. Do you remember he was
Yeah,
eating too much of his cheese?
he ate all his cheese.
Yeah, ate all his cheese. And I
Mm.
don't know how their relationship is to this day, really. There's not
Do you
much, really.
do you think that's what Genesis based All in the Mouse's Night on? Do you think that was the
Yes.
inspiration for All in the Mouse's Night? Steve
God,
Hackett
yeah.
eating all Robert Fripp's
Or
cheese.
Robert Fritz cheese. Yeah, it could
Mm.
have been, could have been. Um, so it's basically it's based on on the tarot. I'm sure plenty of people know this already. And it's a journey of self-discovery. Actually, a lot of these albums are a bit of a journey of self-discovery as their
Mm.
theme. The cover was by his then girlfriend Kim Poor, which I'm not actually keen on the cover, to be quite honest. It's a little bit naive. I've never been a big fan of some of his album covers, but anyway, it did fairly well. Number 26 in the UK charts, and I wrote down here Hackett's All Things Must Pass. Um,
That's
he
exactly
wrote,
what I said earlier on, but I think the
yeah,
connection cut.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Chris Welch liked it. He said he was a painter of sound pictures, but
Whatever that means.
a terrible, a terrible watercolorist. Anyway, Shadow of the Hierophant. There's supposed to be that's the last track on the album was rehearsed for Genesis, and there's supposed to be some bootlegs of that knocking around, but I've never heard it. I don't know if you have, Tim. Uh,
No, I don't think I
version.
have. No, but I had read that that was the
Yeah,
case. Yeah.
yeah. But
Mm.
anyway,
Yet another section of Hackett music cruelly vetoed by the Charterhouse boys.
funny enough, I was going to say, I think the tragedy of, I'm digressing, the tragedy of Steve Hackett is I always think when he was at his best in Genesis, it was always, I think he was always in conjunction with Tony Banks.
Mm.
And I always think if only they could have bloody found a way just to
Mm.
keep him on board, you know. And I'm sure, you know, Steve Hackett is the ultimate Mr. sort of passive aggressive, isn't he? Really. So
Yeah.
and then you're working with somebody. Obviously, as you say, it's the Charter House,
Hence the wine glass
the wine glass,
scenario.
and nervously eating cheese. Um, yeah, Ace of Wands has got a sort of manic, sort of fusion,
Mm,
sort of improvisation feel. I mean, it's propelled along by Phil Collins, really.
mm,
He's got his brother John on flute on Hands of the Priestess.
mhm.
Um, yeah, I can sort of see why maybe like going on to Shadow of the Hierophant. I can sort of see why that didn't get. Mind you, Mike Rutherford had quite a lot, I think, to do with the ending of it. I think he
Really?
part composed that. So,
Oh,
but I can kind of see why that didn't fit onto a Genesis album. Although, to be fair, they could have stuck it on Wind and Wuthering, couldn't they? Because I mean, nothing else bloody worked on there, did it? Really? Uh, but anyway, I mean, you know, I don't know whether he quite rose to the same heights again. I mean, I've listened to a few of his albums up to Defector, I think it is. There's a couple of nice Richie Havens songs on Please Don't Touch that I think were very, very good. And Spectral Mornings has its moments, but I don't think really he touches the. I'm going to get killed by the Steve Hackett fans, but I think certainly by Spectral Mornings, he'd sort of
mm.
maybe he should have rejoined Genesis.
I
But anyway,
sometimes wonder why he didn't. You know.
yeah, could have done. But anyway, I really like this album. I think you mentioned Sally Oldfield there does a great vocal. Uh, yeah, and yeah, my number one, Steve
Yeah,
Hackett.
that's interesting. It's a I'd take Spectral Mornings myself over
Mhm.
Voyage.
Interesting.
Um, I am also interested in your observation that a lot of these albums are about personal journeys. I mean, that would fit with the sort of headline theme here, wouldn't it? You know,
Mm.
sort of
Yeah.
breaking out of the Genesis
Mm.
cage, as it were,
Mm.
and trying to find themselves.
Mm.
You know, with varying degrees of success, as we
Mm.
have been trying to relay this in this episode. Well, look, let's just let's put everyone out their misery. My number one is Small Creeps Day, which I think is a masterpiece. I know that there's different opinions on this. Paul Neuer, was it?
Yeah,
Obviously, wouldn't
Denoyer.
agree with me. We'd have quite a set too about it, I should imagine, if we ever met. Yeah, I love this album. I think the thing is about this album for me is I think this is basically a Genesis album in an alternate universe. The title track is like Supper's Ready. I actually prefer it to Supper's Ready. I mean, I know that that's heresy. Supper's Ready's got great high points, but I think that this works better as a total, sidelong epic, as it were. I think Moonshine is a bit like Squonk. I think Time and Time Again is many too many, but better actually. I think Every Road is, yeah, as you said, like Wind and Wuthering. It's like Your Own Special Way, isn't it? But much better. I mean, I think that this is this could have been a really good Genesis album if you had, and that's not the first time I'm going to say this. I've said this tonight. If you had a slightly better singer, again, I think that this fella who's singing, whose name escapes me, Noel something, isn't it?
Mm.
I want to say Noel Gallagher, but that's
Noel Edmonds.
Noel Edmonds. Just say Noel Edmonds. So Noel Edmonds singing on this album is very weak. Now I think again he's not a very characterful singer. Very, again, technically brilliant, but
Mm.
I think I think that's kind of it brings the album down a little bit, perhaps in the in the popular imagination. But I think he was. I think Mike Rutherford was very sort of inspired at this point, and like Peter Gabriel, I think that he's very good at sort of finding interesting ways to surprise the listener. There's a lot of like time changes, and key changes and things just when you sort of need them. It's very judiciously written, I think this. And yeah, apart from the vocals, the playing I think is great. Anthony Phillips is amazing on this. His contribution to this album is amazing. You know, I think his contribution here is much more important than Mike Rutherford's contribution to the Geese and the
I,
Ghost, in a
I was going to
sense.
say
Yeah.
quite Tony Banks like actually on this album.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
true. Yeah, I mean they're all sort of very musical people, aren't they? Working in a sort of similar area, you know, slightly card romantic, pastoral English soundscapes. But yeah, I mean, I think you were talking about doing a solo episode on Pods from the Wood, was it?
Wood.
On Acolyte.
Hmm.
Voyage of the Acolyte, and I was going to do one on Small Creeps Day, so I probably won't say too much more, you know, because I don't want spoilers to give people too many spoilers. But yeah, I love this album. I really love it. I think it's the strongest effort from any of the, you know, the Genesis members at this point in their career, and so I know that I'm perhaps in a minority there, but
Mm.
I have to be honest
Mm.
because that's what this is all about.
Mhm.
So yeah, do you? I don't know if you have anything else to add, or we should
No,
leave it there.
no. I was just saying,
Mm.
apologise for the technical issues. Actually,
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard, it just had a pigeon on the roof, and
Oh,
it's a tin roof because it's my workshop. So it
right.
sounds like there's a sheep on the roof or something like that.
So you get a lot of that in the countryside.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, lot of pigeons and
Yeah.
red kites and herons and things like that. Ducks, actually,
Oh,
ducks
ducks.
in the garden.
Do you get any
Yeah.
Canada? We're going right off topic here. Do you get any Canada geese in Essex?
There are geese actually in the back field. I don't know what sort they are. They might be Canada geese. Yeah,
Right, right, right. They generally
yeah,
walk around. They're brown, aren't they? Generally walk around in a
mm,
long line.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's the fellas.
That's the fellas. All right, good. Well, I think we won't say any more about the wildfowl in Essex. It's probably time to wind up. So yeah, those are our picks. But what are yours? Yeah, please feel free to share your thoughts with us in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe, comment, like and subscribe. You know, audience engagement is very highly motivating to us. And yeah, so yeah, join us. Join us on the next episode of Crap. I think Peter will be back for the next
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
triple header one. So yeah, join us. Join us. Um, all right, and so it's goodbye from Shaun.
Okay, ta-da.
It's goodbye from me, Tim, and we'll see you on the next Crapper. Ta-ra. Bye, everyone. Bye.